The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus exclaimed, I bless you, Father, Lord of heaven and of earth, for hiding these things from the learned and the clever and revealing them to mere children. Yes, Father, for that is what it pleased you to do. Everything has been entrusted to me by my Father. And no one knows the Son except the Father, just as no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened, and I will give you rest. Shoulder my yoke and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Yes, my yoke is easy and my burden light. Gospel of the Lord. My dear friends, earlier this week, 3 young men in the community of Morvan, a suburb of our capital city, Port of Spain, were stopped by the police. Residents claim that these young men were then summarily executed after having given themselves up, and that their claim is in fact supported by footage from a neighbor's security camera. Not long after the incident, the streets in and around the capital city exploded into anger, being blocked at various places by flaming barricades, and it took most of the day for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to restore order and calm. Thus it was I found myself last week trying to figure out and decipher the events that had taken place. And I replayed again over and over in my mind images that I had seen posted on social media. A particular image stuck in my mind. It was that of a particular section of the crowd of protesters. These were in the main very persons, very dark-skinned complexion of African descent. And planted in the middle of these protesters was what looked like a white man barebacked holding an umbrella. Commentators on social media claimed that this young man, this white man, was in fact a Venezuelan migrant. It was all so bizarre, and I felt that I did not, in fact, know my country at all. As I replayed the events of last week, my mind ran to the words of Jesus in this weekend's gospel. I bless you, Father, Lord of heaven and of earth, for hiding these things from the learned and the clever and revealing them to mere children. The masses of the urban poor who took to the street last week are by no means saints or angels. And yet, these mere children illustrated in a way that the learned and the clever, the expert criminologists and social scientists could not. The kind of place that Trinidad is. And they did so by rudely plastering on the city streets the unvarnished truth about the rugged kind of existence that they lived. From them, I learned that as a society, we have yet to develop a general respect for human life, given the fact that persons are so easily snuffed out, whether at the hands of heavily armed criminal gangs or at the hands of heavily armed agents of the state, the police. Studying them, I learned that our society is in need of a professional kind of policing that goes far, far beyond handcuffing people, roughing up citizens, and shooting bandits. A different kind of police where they see themselves as agents making critical interventions on behalf of troubled communities, persons trained to interact with the poor, with those in crisis. As I reflected on these incidents with my own friends, I thought about issues such as illiteracy, early pregnancy, and petty criminality, all of which conspire to increase the immiseration of these citizens. I reflected on the fact that the words of our anthem, here every creed and race find an equal place, are not true for some sections of our national community, and indeed have never been true for them. Going back to the gospel, Jesus invites his listeners to pursue the path of true wisdom and knowledge, a path that passes through him. And in so doing, Jesus echoes personified wisdom in the book of Sirach, chapter 53, verses 23 to 27. And Jesus says to his listeners, "Come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened, and I will give you rest. Shoulder my yoke and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Yes, my yoke is easy and my burden is light." One of the major problems of the society of Jesus' time was that its major institution, the community of faith, had entered a moment of crisis. And it was felt that Jewish religion saddled many people with observances that most of them found unsustainable. In the face of this crisis, Jesus holds up his own teaching, his own yoke, his own burden. And his own burden, his sweet yoke, his simple command of love was far more potentially transformative than all the halakha or religious observances of persons such as the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Jewish priests. "Come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened, and I will give you rest." We here in our own time have come to a similar moment of crisis. And our major social institutions, it seems, have failed people. And they have failed people such as the citizens who rioted in the streets of our nation's capital last week. Religious bodies, the educational establishment, the national security system, local government. All of these institutions, in one way or the other, have failed the people. And so, as in the time of Jesus, we have an urgent need to diligently seek wisdom. As I reflected further on the issue, I am reminded that in West Indian tradition, wisdom was often conveyed in the form of stories, especially Nancy stories with their roots in West Africa. And I asked myself that perhaps what might be needed in the face of these multiple crises, in the face of the perpetual failure of our major social institutions, is a prolonged period of listening to the stories, the wisdom of the mere children, the wisdom of persons who live in places with names like Silot and Laventil and Morvan and George and Nelson Streets in Port of Spain. In them, I think, we will find nuggets of wisdom, and we will find out firsthand from people who live there what works and what does not work for them. Wisdom can also come through the process of experimentation, through the process of trial and error. At the height of the Great Depression in 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the World War II President of the United States, gave a famous address at the Oglethorpe College in Georgia, in which he rallied his countrymen. And I think his words in that address find deep resonance in our current climate. And I'd like to read some of them for you. He says, "This country needs, and unless I mistake its temper, the country demands bold, persistent experimentation. It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something." Historians comment that this was in fact the spirit at the heart of what later came to be known as the New Deal in the United States, the series of social and economic measures that lifted the masses of the American poor out of the economic doldrums in which they had been languishing. Wisdom, my dear friends, comes to those who diligently search for her. She comes to those willing to listen to others. And she comes to those who search for her by the arduous process of trial and error. I pray for all of us that we may have the courage to listen. God bless.